Jr. recently retired after 50 years as the president and CEO of the African American Museum of Dallas. So, just jumping right into the interview, can you share a brief history of the museum and its mission?
Yeah. Well, the museum was started when I came to Dallas as a museum director, museum and library director at Bishop College for a museum that we didn't have. The president and I talked about it. And there was a void in this area in terms of preserving and presenting the African American experience. And we thought, what better place than to have it other than at Bishop College? So that's how we got started. So our focus is to identify, collect, preserve, and present historical and artistic objects that define the African American experience. When we first started, we started off with a research collection at Bishop College. Bishop had about 20,000 volumes of rare books out of print. They were in the general stacks. And one of the things I did was to pull them together, and we had a special collection room. And the room was named for Dr. Bank, who had been at Bishop since 1929. Everybody loved Dean Bank. And the first time we had an exhibition, I came in September '74. The first exhibition we had was January 15, 1975. It just so happened that it was MLK's birthday. We didn't do it we did it because that's Wednesday. And we continued to build on that exhibition and some other small activities that we were doing. The president gave us the oldest building on the campus for the museum. We asked, and he gave us that building. It was the old chapel, and we had architectural rendering. We got some fund, some from the National Endowment for the Humanities with a challenge grant for $50,000. And we were going to renovate that building. And we continued to work on that until later on we discovered that it might be best for us to find another location for the museum. By that time, we had become independent, even though we're still on the campus. We got a 501c3 status. We had an advisory board before that was a board of visitors, and that board became the official African American Museum Board at the time. Red National was the first chair of that board for us. When we got our board of trustees, Valeria Evans, who was a local volunteer, very involved in this community. She became the first chair, and Brenda Jackson, who's now retired from Encore, was the first secretary of the board. We have 4 founding board members who are still living: Barbara Watkins, Brenda Jackson, Billy Allen, and Valeria Evans.
Okay.
And they were all at the, 2 of them were at the Founders Ball on December 14th.
Okay.
We have, over the years, built what we think is a pretty decent collection of African American art. Our pride and joy is the African American folk art and decorative arts collection. And this is the gallery we're in now. We have objects that go back to 1824. And we try to rotate every 6 or 8 months. Sometimes it's a little longer. But we have over 500 pieces of folk art, most of which was given to us by a family in Lafayette, Louisiana, Dr. Warren and Mrs. Sylvia Lowe. And over the years, we picked up pieces here and there, and we scraped and scrimped and got some funds and purchased some pieces like our pottery pieces in.
Okay. Awesome. It's beautiful in here too. So, what inspired you to establish and lead the museum? And what role does it play in the African American community today?
There was a need, there was a void. There was no such thing in this region. And I was born in Louisiana, but went to school in Georgia, worked in Kentucky, and had been familiar with the schools on the southeast coast, like Fisk, Howard, Tuskegee, and they all had these mostly collection of historical documents. They were really not into galleries and fine art. And we decided that we need to do something. And fortunately, the community got behind us. I had read about the Hall of Negro Life that was here in 1936 as a part of the Texas Centennial. And I contacted Maceo Smith, who was the driving force behind that effort. Maceo came, agreed to work with me. Well, there were several people in that meeting. Maceo was one of them. Andy Strauss, who later became mayor, Red Jane, Dr. McDaniel, who's the vice president at Bishop, Ray Nash, Betty Marcus, the son and sister-in-law. And they all agreed to pitch in and help me do what I had to do to get the museum going.
Wow. So, when you think about historical inequities and social injustice, what inequities and social injustices have shaped the African American experience in Dallas, and how do those histories impact the museum mission and programs that's offered?
Well, I think Dallas has been impacted like most other communities in terms of racial justice or racial injustice. We hope that by having this museum here, we can play a role in one, exposing the racial injustices, and two, developing programs that will create an awareness of the contribution that African Americans have made to the building of Dallas and to the building of this country. And we hope that when people come here, when they leave, they will be different than when they came in here because of the information. Our mentors taught us that African American museums ought to be centers of liberation, centers of information. We feel that if we provide information to people, some of which they haven't had, it would change their attitude. And the attitude, hopefully, will cause them to change their behavior. So kids who come in here and who have been told there ain't nothing, ain't gonna be nothing, will come in here and see where there's a spoon in that case or whatever was done by Peter Benson, who was born in 1783. He's the only only person of African descent for whom we have documentation as a silversmith. Now there were some others, but they were on plantations and what have you, and they were not permitted to document that stuff, but Peter Benson was. And when the kids come in here and they say, oh, he was born in 1783, yep. And then they would look at a quilt, a coverlet, that was done in 1824 by a 16-year-old enslaved girl. Her name was Sarah May, and she embroidered her name on it. And it sort of changed the attitude that if these people were able to do these things under the circumstances, we don't have any excuse for not doing that.
Yeah, that's powerful. So, in what ways do economic conditions and social factors and even local policies such as funding or political decisions being made, how do those things affect the museum's ability to operate?
Well,
and serve the community?
like most small and minority education and cultural institutions, it's a struggle, 24/7, inadequately funded. We don't have the funding basis or endowment that some of the other institutions have. And so we have to work twice as hard to get the resources that we need. Texas is an interesting place. In Texas, you get monies for services provided. For instance, we get money from the city of Dallas, but it's for services that we provide. It's not for anything else. And that has been the pattern in Texas. So as a result, small and minority institutions have to struggle and keep programs going in order to get the fund. Whereas in other states and cities, like Birmingham, they are a line item in the city budget, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. The museum in Wilberforce, Ohio is a part of the Ohio State Historical Commission. Then you can go, California African American Museum is a state museum. So they get that funding. So they know they're gonna get funding. With us, we don't know. If there's a budget crunch or something in Dallas and they start cutting institutions, it's gonna impact us. And so we either have to cut programs or find some other sources for funding the programs and activities that we have. It's a struggle. It's a struggle.
Okay. Wow. So with that being said, who are the museum's key partners, and in what ways do these relationships help improve or even create challenges for the museum?
Okay. Some of our key partners are the City of Dallas, some corporation fund us on a regular basis. And then we have to go into the community. And we have had very good support from the African American community. And that's something to be talked about, because if you talk about performing arts, we've been there. We've had church choir, college choir, high school choir. But when you talk about museum, for many of us, that's a novelty. For instance, when I was, well, it wasn't until after I graduated from college that we were able to freely go into museums, because we were not allowed in those institutions. And there's a story about Elizabeth Catlett, who was working at Doughlas, and the policy was Negroes could not put foot on City Park land. So Elizabeth Catlett rented a van and got a gangplank and took the kids to the museum and put the gangplank from the van to the museum, which meant they never put foot on the ground, but yet they were able to go and see that museum. The first museum I went to was in Chicago, the Museum of Science and Industry. I was visiting a cousin in Momence, Illinois, and she made certain that we were exposed to certain kinds of activities. When she took us to Chicago, we saw the museum, we went to the Field Museum, we went to the zoo, Brookfield Zoo, we went to Lincoln Park, and she took us around different places. But other than that, we couldn't, there was no such thing as our going into those places.
Mm. Oh, we have 25 minutes. Oh. All right. So in terms of the museum's strengths and responses, what strategies and resources has the museum used to involve the community and ensure that the voices of African Americans are celebrated and represented in preserving its history?
Well, we have worked somewhat through the churches, community organizations. For instance, on March 1st, we have the Scott Joplin Chamber Orchestra coming This is the 10th year they're coming. And for 10 years, the North Texas cluster of the links have pretty much underwritten the fee, and we have to make up some. But they have been very good, consistent supporters of ours. Then we have the fraternities and the sororities. More and more of them are supporting us now. They're putting us in that budget. And we have a couple of churches, some of you mega churches, that support us. Now, in order to hear from the people in the committee, we have several committees. One, we have a South Dallas Community Engagement Committee. And what we're trying to do there is to develop strategies for getting more people from South Dallas to visit the museum. Because we're not pleased at the representation or lack of representation that we have from the South Dallas community. So on last Friday, one of the pastors from this area, a young pastor, who worked with the South Dallas Faith Coalition, has committed to helping us to get more involved and get more people involved in the community. We're trying to work with the neighborhood association to see if they will help us with the project. Of course, we work with the school district. We have been able to get some support for kids to attend the Scott Joplin Chamber Orchestra on March 1st from DISA. Then we have Dr. Usama Rogers from DeSoto, who's working with us, a very good supporter. So we're working at it.
Okay. Can you highlight a program or an initiative that has been particularly successful in addressing social injustices and inequities?
Well, we have had the Texas Black Invitation Rodeo, which is an education. Well, it started off as an education program, and now it's our second largest fundraiser. And what we were trying to do was to provide information to people who are from Texas that never heard of Black Cowboy, and to grow. It started off as a 2-day event, a festival and a rodeo. And we just decided that 2 days was too much, so we just went to 1 day. And for the last 2 years, it's been a sellout. And we have provided an opportunity for local vendors to do that stuff over at the rodeo. And we're trying to keep it at a price that was affordable for the institution, for the vendors. The other thing is we work with Cheryl Smith on MLK weekend, where she has a health fair, and she has about 30 or 40 vendors in here. And these are African American minority vendors. And that's one way of helping them with economic development. We hope that's some help there. And we provide an opportunity for them to come and let's have to compete with each other at the venue.
That's awesome. What are the biggest opportunities for the museum in terms of growth and expansion for the future, and what challenges does it face in reaching more people and making bigger impact?
The challenge is staffing. We could get much more involvement in the community if we had more staffing. For our 50th anniversary, we have a campaign going, 50 for 50. And we're trying to get 50 folks to give us $50,000 over the next 5 years. We have about 20 so far. We have 1 or 2 of our sponsors who have given us $200,000 each. And we have 1 position that we're trying to endow within the next year. And then the next year we'll do another position so we can attract some of the top people in the country to come here and be on our staff. But that's a challenge. One of the challenges we have is getting more young people involved with the museum. There's a board committee now that has been charged with going out looking for people to diversify our board because most of our board members are not young people. We have a few, about 5 or 6 on the board who are less than 50 maybe. But we're trying to get more young African Americans and young people on our board and to get them more involved. And they're eager, they're anxious to get on the board. And so that's the task before our board now, to actually recruit those people, bring them in, and let them take over. You know, we have one group called a Young Professional Council. It's made of young African Americans who are less than 40, and they are planning some program. Matter of fact, they have a major exhibition that's coming up in March. It's going to be an exhibition of Black women photographers, and it's that project. They're doing some other things too, but that's one way of trying to get those people involved. The other activity we have is Friends of Folk and Decorative Art. That's a group of people whose primary concern or mission is to help us to raise some funds to add to the collection and to provide programs. On April 6th, we have a lecture series and a dinner for the Friends of Folk and Decorative Art.
Okay.
This Sunday.
So a lot of things in the works. So thinking about global perspective, how do global factors such as immigration or international discussions on racial justice impact the missions work?
Well, we have tried in our own feeble way to have discussions of a global nature. Dr. Delaney, who is the deputy director and retired history professor from UT Arlington, has been very instrumental in having discussion on a global basis about racial justice, economic, and that kind of thing. So we are making some strides, we hope, in providing a place for the discussion of these issues here at the museum.
All right, and my final question is, what advice would you give to future social workers looking to support cultural institutions like the African American Museum?
To take advantage of any collaboration or partnership we have. For instance, we have one initiative here called A Culture of Wellness. You know, African Americans are the sickest folks on the planet. High blood pressure, heart disease, prostate cancer. So what we're trying to do is that each month to select, I don't want to say disease, but something that impacts us. Like mental illness is something we don't talk about. So we're partnering with the African American Steeple Alliance for Mental Health. And during the month of July, which is National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, we do some things. But with the cultural awareness, what we're trying to do is to get some tracks or records on whatever issue we're dealing with on that month. So if you come to the museum, you can't leave without having that track on heart disease, on high blood pressure, on that thing. Because if people are not well, they can't enjoy the museum. So what we're trying to do is to help them to get well, stay well, or be well.
I love it. All right, well, that's all the questions that I have. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me and allowing me to utilize this conversation to further educate our students on just how external factors and issues influences the work of community organizations and the community it serves.